typing that. Okay. I think we should be set. Are we?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Perfect. And is there anyone watching the video yet, or are we not able to see that?
There's a few folks in the chat.
Amazing.
On YouTube. But what I'm concerned with is that the owl is not picking up that projector screen for the folks that are at home. Madeline, say something, please.
Hello. Saying something. It says live on the Zoom screen. Does that mean that it, like, I don't know.
It's projecting to YouTube right now.
Okay.
But I'm trying to see if I've got the camera positioned well enough that it's following back to the projector. And it doesn't look like it is. Right, Christina, the issue is, or Amy, what about the folks that are zooming in from home? Do you get to see them at all? Well, maybe we should just continue and not worry about it. And unfortunately, the folks that are zooming in from home might just be audio.
I am more than okay without showing my face. That is not an issue for me.
Okay, so folks can hear just fine. Thank you. Shall we get started? I want to thank everyone. My name is Marcy Helpin. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight or tuning in, I suppose, might be the appropriate phrase. Thank you for joining us this evening for our panel that explores the topic of police reform. My name is Marcy Helpin, and I'm the advisor for the Speech and Debate Club on campus. The seeds of this panel started with an invitation from the Black History Experience Committee, and I want to thank them for allowing us to participate in part of the programming for this month. As we brainstormed how this panel would unfold, we as a club decided two things. We acknowledge the passion and controversy that might rest with many on the topic of discussion. As a result, we decided that the topic was better suited as a panel discussion than as a debate. And the second thing was that this was a topic that by nature called for coordination with Justice Studies Club. With that said, I want to thank Professor Angela Mortel of the Social Sciences Division and the advisor to Justice Studies Club for her expertise and for the involvement of her students. I also want to quickly thank the Humanities and Social Sciences Divisions for their support and offer a special thank you to Leilani Farrell, the administrative assistant to the Humanities Division, who literally gave me an hour of her time yesterday to help me figure out the technology for this evening, which clearly is still not perfect, but that's my fault, not hers. And of course, I want to thank all of the student participants for their work in putting together these presentations and for their willingness to participate. As we move into the topic for this evening, I want to preface our discussion with an ancient Greek concept, the notion of the soi logoi, which translates into countervailing arguments. This concept rests at the foundation of most debates and most controversies, simply suggesting that there are multiple sides or perspectives for any one issue. It is with this beginning premise that we approach tonight's topic. And with that said, our attempt this evening is not to advocate for any one position, but to explore a variety of perspectives on the topic of police reform. We also acknowledge that many have strong feelings on these issues, and so we want to recognize the emotion that may rest with individual experience or experiences. We do not want to pretend to speak for any particular voice or to deny any one experience. Our goal tonight is simply to explore, discover, and learn from a sampling of the information surrounding these controversies and hopefully provide some insight into their complexities. With that, I want to introduce our presenters, Madeline Hill, Ali Young, Diego Torres, Ali Wagner, and Michaela Peterson. I will hand it over to the first presenter.
Good evening to everyone that is attending our panel on police reform. I appreciate you being here to listen today. My name is Ali Wagner. I'm a sociology major and justice studies minor here at Lewis Clark State College. This is an extremely important topic that needs to have more attention brought to it. I want to start by saying that in discussing the defund the police movement, we are not trying to promote a certain way of believing or a specific life experience. This information is coming to you as a way to educate and inform the public about issues that take place in the world of criminal justice. I'm going to begin by discussing the history of the defund the police slogan and prominent times when the movement has reemerged in the United States. The first workings of documented conversations about issues with law enforcement in society came from sociologists and activists such as W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote Black Reconstruction in America in 1935, and Walter Benjamin, who wrote Critique of Violence in 1921, which were foundational texts in developing abolition democracy theory that described how democracy would be in the future if policies that oppose slavery, lynching, segregation, and related practices continued to make progress. Additions to this theory included Angela Davis's perspective on the policing and correctional institutions in America, referred to as the prison industrial complex, which stated that many practices within these entities are overly oppressive and unnecessary. Notable cases that have appeared and sparked further interest in the defund the police movement and abolition democracy theory have been the Rodney King beating by 4 Los Angeles police officers in 1991, the shooting of 12-year-old Tamir Rice by 2 Cleveland police officers in 2014, and recently the killing of George Floyd by a Minnesota police officer in 2020, amongst countless other names that deserve to be recognized. With the most current resurgence of police brutality acknowledgement, I will be moving on to overview common views the public has about the defund the police movement. The first is the due process model that is typically concerned with creating a fair criminal justice system that does not infringe on constitutional rights, especially those of minority individuals coming into contact with law enforcement. This view acknowledges the problems with our current system, including the fact that only around 30% of police officers obtain a bachelor's degree, the military model of policing endorsed in the United States, how blind loyalty may be rewarded in the profession, and how the system rarely prosecutes itself without being caught in a bad position by outside sources. Although there may be extreme positions regarding the response to these issues, such as abolishing the police completely or cutting off all resources to the departments, many people endorsing the due process model will assert that these problems may be fixed by reallocating funds to things like social services. One example of a social service that could be given financial support and become more included in the calls are the institutions equipped to deal with mental health crises, like social workers or health professionals. The state of Oregon has implemented a program called CAHOOTS, in which these exact measures are being taken, and reportedly save an estimated $8.5 million in public safety spending annually. Another key focus in the due process perspective on the defund the police movement is emphasizing the presence of different types of racism in our society. Though there are people that exhibit intentional, deliberate acts of racism, more commonly found is the disparate impact of practices that deny housing, employment, and other areas of opportunity to more adversely affect a certain group of people, even though rules or laws are formally written as seemingly neutral. Changing these issues in our society is the first step towards reforming our social institutions, including the criminal justice system, through the due process lens. The second view of the defund the police movement commonly found in the public is the crime control model, which places emphasis on reducing crime and deviance in society through increased police force and government action. Law enforcement truly is critical in maintaining public safety, especially when using practices of community policing, though many believe we ask the police to fill too many roles they are not equipped to handle. This perspective asserts that the police officers are needed to keep inner workings of society running smoothly, and reallocating any sort of funding would prevent the departments from completing their duties. Rather, the crime control perspective thinks that training and other program implementations will improve any issues with police brutality or racial aggressions. Examples of ways to begin the betterment and increase the accountability of the police force include officer sensitivity training, a recorded national police misconduct database, citizen review boards, more intensive screening of who is hired into the profession, and overall more education to those that enter the field. Though it would be difficult to implement all of these practices, it is necessary to the cause of decreasing injustice in the criminal justice system through the view of the crime control model. Both the crime control and due process perspectives of the Defund the Police movement have merit in their own ways, but it is important to understand the foundation of both to form one's own opinion on the topic. These two views are the sides of what typically occur in society. But next, we will discuss the most likely way that the legislative and executive branches will handle the topic. Thank you for your attention. I will now hand it over to Diego to discuss the remainder of the Defund the Police movement concepts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diego Torres, and I'm currently majoring in Justice Studies with a minor in Spanish and Psychology here at LC State. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to tune in tonight to listen to us speak about a few topics that are extremely prevalent in our society today and that are still up for discussion. Today, I want to be able to inform you about the movement we all know too well as defunding the police. I want to reiterate that we aren't here to speak on our opinions, but simply provide the public with facts concerning the topic at hand. Congress in 2020 introduced a legislation, Justice in Policing Act of 2020, that would reform American police as we know. One of the many reforms that this bill aims to create is a national police misconduct registry, a database, if you will, that holds complaints against police. The bill proposed would make the prosecution of police officers' misconduct easier. It addresses racism, eliminates unannounced police raids known as no-knock warrants. It forces federal police to use body and dashboard cameras, calls also for federal funds to be withheld from local police forces who don't make similar changes, and places a ban on chokeholds. The defunding of the police movement is way bigger than it seems and aims to also disband police use of force due to many cases that spark this pressure for change, like Tiana Taylor's and George Floyd's. The JPA of 2020 was introduced by Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Statistics show that police funding is the second largest category in the budget of government spending, following right after education. In 2017, the U.S. Census of Government compiled data and found that money spent on policing was sitting at $193 billion. That alone is 9.2% of the budget. Statistics also show that on average, the United States spent $340 per person per year for public policing, for a total of $193 billion. The majority of the police funds are allocated to pensions, benefits, and 2/3 for payroll alone. If we were to break up the $193 billion among all employed law enforcement officials and part-time law enforcement officers, it comes to about $193,000 per police officer. The money the police department aren't given aren't just for those areas, but for others depending on various factors, like the size of the municipality, fiscal conditions in those jurisdictions, and policy choices. Another common question is, where does all the money come from? Policing is funded through many revenue streams. That includes federal grants, public funds, fines and fees, forfeitures, and private donations. After numerous amounts of police misconduct movement, the national issue came down to defunding the police. Accountability is an important thing in any job. When we witness or hear about cases where police officers act in ways that aren't ethical in the workforce, we're left to question one thing. How do we keep police officers' misconduct in check? While using citizen review boards would significantly help us as it is compiled with citizen representatives who essentially review police misconduct, we want to make sure that police officers who take the law into their own hands are held accountable. No one is above the law to be able to get away with taking someone else's life. I believe that the reason we have made this movement heard all over is that we have all seen what happens when we allow someone else in the department to take care of the issue, and it's just not enough. Suspending someone with K isn't anything fair. It shows us that the badge is important over life. The thin blue line, unfortunately, doesn't fade even with misconduct in the mix. That isn't the message we want to get across to anyone. We want accountability. By independent review, we can ensure that individuals are also fired for their actions. Keeping track of how many complaints are against an officer is helpful because we need to know how many times the officer in question has been given chances to fix their actions. A way that the money can be reallocated is by implementing a CAHOOTS program. CAHOOTS is a program that was started in Eugene, Oregon. It is a health crisis intervention team. In criminology, I learned that this program was established so that when calls came in, it ensured a better response to those with mental illness, substance abuse, and homelessness. The call would be redirected to them if the person fell into one of the three categories. It also benefits the police department because for those police officers that don't have enough crisis intervention training, it leaves the phone lines open for other emergencies and lets the team help those individuals. Officer sensitivity training isn't always available due to budget restrictions. However, moving funds around opens up the possibility of doing so. Some officers have proved that it's not only required, but important to build those interpersonal relationships with the public. Having that support from the public is crucial since the job consists of daily interactions with the public. Better screening of those who are hired onto the force is also an important aspect, as we want a more diverse force. Research has shown that a more diverse law enforcement agency has better support because there is more trust in police and a better relationship between police officers and citizens. Thank you.
With that, we move to the next speaker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Madeline Hill, and I am the Speech and Debate Club president and a member of the Justice Studies Club. Just as a friendly reminder, today's event is a panel discussion and not a debate. We are trying to keep a friendly, informative environment regarding recent topics that have related to the Black Lives Matter movement. This panel discussion will be analyzing the controversy around no-knock warrants, and I will be presenting this panel discussion today with Ali Young, our Speech and Debate Club Vice President. For this topic, I will begin by explaining what no-knock warrants are along with their intended purpose, and then Ali will begin outlining the controversies along the use of no-knock warrants, leading us into discussion of this panel topic. To begin, it is important to understand what no-knock warrants are. According to Cornell law, a no-knock warrant is a search warrant authorizing police officers to enter certain premises without first knocking and announcing their presence or purpose prior to entering the premises. The alternative to no-knock warrants is the traditional knock and announce rule, in which after obtaining a warrant, officers would knock on the door and announce their entry prior to entering a home. No-knock warrants began in the United States during the 1970s during the country's war on drugs under former President Richard Nixon. This form of warrant was developed for cases where traditional knocking and announcing would put the officers or others at risk, or when knocking and announcing would result in evidence being destroyed. For example, a no-knock warrant may be issued during a case involving drugs if it is suspected that the officers or civilians on the scene would be injured by informing the suspect of the officer's presence. It is approximated that over 20,000 no-knock entries occur annually. Currently, Florida, Oregon, and Virginia have banned no-knock warrants, in addition to them being banned in several select cities and departments across the country. Other states have been introducing bills to ban no-knock warrants. For example, Kentucky has introduced a bill to ban no-knock warrants, and the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act bans officers from carrying out a warrant until they provide notice and purpose before entering the home. The mayor of Santa Fe, New Mexico, proposed an ordinance to ban no-knock warrants and to require all officers to turn on body cameras before executing search warrants. Senator R. Alvaro of Tennessee proposed legislation to require officers to knock and identify themselves. Memphis PD banned no-knock warrants in June 2020. Indianapolis PD banned no-knock warrants in July 2020, and they are banned even when their police department helps out other law enforcement agencies. And San Antonio, Texas is considering banning no-knock warrants, with suspending its policy in June and working toward a policy that allows the warrants in rare cases. In order to make an informed decision regarding no-knock warrants, it is important to understand where the controversies lie. Ali will now be outlining many of the controversies among no-knock warrants.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Ali Young, and I'll be discussing, like Madeline said, the controversy that exists with no-knock warrants. If you follow any form of the media, you are probably aware of the continuous controversy seen with no-knock warrants. As Madeline has already addressed, no-knock warrants can provide safety for all involved and prevent evidence from being destroyed. On the other hand, they can also put harmless individuals at risk who quickly can turn into victims due to biasness or other ill judgment by officers. Other officers on property or otherwise involved with the situation can quickly become unaware and also be put at risk. In 1995, the Supreme Court ruled that knock and announce warrants are an element of the Fourth Amendment as a result of the Wilson versus Arkansas case. As you probably know from other Supreme Court rulings, the final ruling is never the final result of an issue. You may be asking yourself at this point, what exactly has led to the controversy we see today? The recent case involving Breonna Taylor has really put no-knock warrants into questioning. Breonna Taylor was an African-American medical staff worker who was shot and killed in her apartment on March 13th, 2020. Officers Brett Hankinson, Jonathan Mattingly, and Miles Cosgrove received a no-knock warrant in order to enter Taylor's apartment due to belief that a different suspect was receiving drug packages from their home. This case was completely unrelated to Taylor. As the officers entered in plain clothing in the apartment, Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, awoke and thought the officers were intruders, which led him to shoot at the officers. The officers shot back, resulting in the death of Taylor. Because of the highlighting of this case in the media especially, many questions are now being asked, such as, should the officers have been dressed in uniform during the raid? Should the raid have even happened in the first place? And are no-knock warrants a violation of constitutional rights? Nearly a year after Breonna Taylor's death, and we still do not have explicit answers to these questions. Statistical data from a 2014 American Civil Liberties Union report states that in 2011 through 2012, 42% of SWAT teams' raids targeted Black people at 42% and 12% targeted Hispanics, leading to a disproportionate amount of people being targeted in the minority population at 54%. The report also indicates that most police departments have in place standards that allow for SWAT deployment in cases involving hostage, barricade, active shooter, or other emergency scenarios, or in high-risk warrant scenarios. But what constitutes a high-risk scenario depends largely on the subjective beliefs of the officers involved. This report was published in 2014. This tells us that no-knock warrants have been an item of controversy well before Breonna Taylor's death. Despite what others may think, no-knock warrants have achieved what they are designed to achieve. In 1997, a surprise pre-dawn raid in Brooklyn revealed a ready-to-detonate pipe bomb. Two of the apartment's inhabitants were arrested. A roommate of the two suspects testified that the suspects were indeed planning to bomb a crowded Brooklyn subway and result in the death of hundreds of innocent New Yorkers. When we compare this case to Breonna Taylor's, it becomes quickly difficult to outright ban no-knock warrants, but still too difficult to say some sort of change is not necessary. In response to recent events, many cities and entire states have made it quite clear where they stand when it comes to no-knock warrants. Madeline has already pointed out that some of the states have responded by banning or reforming no-knock warrants. Although we can use these examples to decide upon our own perception of the issue, there is still more to consider. These examples in themselves are controversial, with many states still on board with leaving no-knock warrants as they are, while others are seeking the policy to be reformed, and even more are issuing changes like in the state of Kentucky and New Mexico, as Madeline had mentioned. But we should go beyond simply banning or not banning no-knock warrants. The answer could very well lie in utilizing quick knock warrants where officers knock, announce their presence, and then enter the building nearly simultaneously. or through mandating all officers to go through new trainings, wearing body cameras during the events, issuing mandatory wait times, or the complete elimination of nighttime rates. Today, we have discussed the complexities around no-knock warrants. You should now have a better understanding of what no-knock warrants are, why they were created and used in the first place, and be able to recognize where the controversy exists with them today. To wrap up, I would like to leave you with a quote by Sunday Adeleha. Can you start a movement in your land that will encourage men and women to begin to think, to begin to make sound judgment and informed decisions? Will you bring illumination to your people? Will you facilitate understanding amidst those whom you live with? The earth is crying for people who make sound judgment and informed decisions. Thank you.
That brings us to our final speaker.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, you could speak a little bit louder though.
Can you hear me better now?
A little muffled.
Okay, let me see. Okay.
There we go.
Hi, my name is Michaela Peterson. I am the president of the Justice.
You sound distant, Michaela.
Am I better now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, I'm like right up on my computer. Okay. My name is Michaela Peterson. I am the president of the Justice Studies Club here on campus. I am a chemistry major with getting an associate's in Justice Studies, and I am coming to this panel with information on police body cameras. And again, as a common, what we've been saying this whole panel is that we are not trying to sway anyone, and that this is the panel just discussing the.
You just cut out, Michaela.
Sorry. Okay, so I am going to be discussing the body cameras, and the negative aspect of the body cameras is that the cost of the cameras is a main point that is being discussed. According to the Police Executive Research Forum, which the PERF is, they're going over numbers of each of the police
We can't
department.
hear you here. We're losing your volume.
The PERF, the Police Executive Research Firm, has discussed different police departments and the numbers associated with incorporating the police body cameras. In Messa's Police Department currently has 330 cameras for the use of about 44% of their personnel. With their numbers, each camera cost about $120 to purchase, but bundled with the maintenance, it was about a little over $1,100. With Phoenix's total cost, they were totaling upwards of $2,500 to $3,000 per camera per year. And the cost that is associated with that is maintenance, the camera itself, storage of the electronic files. The Dallas Police Department deploying 1,000 cameras to 30% of their personnel were $197, but to fulfill the FOIA request, which is the Freedom of Information for Fulfillment request, totaling about $1,100. The camera price range for equipment, according to the survey, estimated about $4,000 for the camera, and then $1,000 for the storage of electronic files for the cameras. Larger departments, it can run to millions of dollars. In just 1 year of the fiscal reporting data was $1,334,717 was spent for police body-worn cameras, and another $4 million for the storage of the video files. With the institution of using the body cameras in police departments, the cost, of course, has been the bigger problem, but Another problem that arises is that the technology is new. Having a lot of this technology being either forced upon on police departments or being used selectively is has been a problem because Columbus, Ohio officials have invested $4.5 million in the body-worn cameras at police to ensure that they're used correctly. They're incorporating this because of the fatal shootings that have happened in their city. Columbus is one of the largest cities in Ohio, and according to Mayor Ginther, his concerns are the privacy concerns as well as the cost concerns, because the communities being okay with being on camera is an issue. If there is a situation that has arisen, are they going to be comfortable with discussing that in front of a camera, as well as the public pressure of the cameras. The cameras have not been used longer. The first use was in 2016, and they're still being worked on now in 2021 now. And so another con of police body cameras is when they are on, are they going to stay on? Do they have the ability for officers to turn off? Because officers discuss sensitive cases or active cases between one another. And if the laws instituted declare that cameras being turned off or turned on or having audio or no audio associated with the cameras goes into another negative impact of the body cameras is legislation. How are the cameras going to be stored? How long are they stored? And whether or not they can be turned on active calls, or they turn on all the time while the officers wear them. And that is a problem where lies is what is heard on the cameras. And the cameras that are on the officers in their front chest, they do not capture the whole picture. They see what the officer sees on their chest. If the officer happens to turn their head or is just talking to someone, the camera doesn't necessarily pick it up because the officer does not fully turn their body. There are cameras that go on the glasses, they're glasses mounted or eyewear mounted cameras that can see what the officer sees, like as in their head rather than their chest, but those cameras tend to run more expensive. And while they're seeing the necessity of using body cameras, the cost benefit analysis is still being determined on whether or not the expensive cost of these cameras will benefit them in the way that the public sees. There's a lot of public pressure of body use cameras, and what is associated with incorporating body cameras into the police officer's routine has more information to come about it. It still needs to be discussed. It still needs to be researched. So with that information, I will end my negative impact on the body cameras and turn it back to the panel leaders.
Thank you so much, Michaela. And I want to add a quick clause or a quick pause or a quick caveat that we did have another planned speaker who, due to extenuating circumstances and unforeseen circumstances, was unable to participate and was originally planning on offering some of the benefits of body cameras to sort of be the countervailing argument to, or the countervailing perspective to what Michaela just offered to us. And so in not anywhere near sufficient terms, but to at least offer a little bit. I want to offer just 2 quick points that I found. One is that there was a 2014 document published by the Community Oriented Policing Services branch of the Department of Justice titled Implementing a Body-Worn Camera Program, Recommendations and Lessons Learned. And this document from the Department of Justice points out that a police department that deploys body-worn cameras is making a statement that it believes the actions of its officers are a matter of public record, end quote. And as the document continues to explain and points out, the decision for police officers to wear body cameras is actually a serious one, because when body cameras are implemented, then the expectation unfolds for members of the public or members of the media to eventually request access to that footage. In addition, according to this DOJ document, it does highlight some of the benefits of body cameras, which include that law enforcement agencies are using body-worn cameras in various ways, which can improve evidence collection. It can strengthen officer performance and accountability. It can enhance agency transparency. It can document encounters between the police and the public. And it can help to investigate and resolve complaints in officer-involved incidents. In addition, according to a 2018 November article on body-worn cameras from the National Institute of Justice Journal, the potential benefits of body cameras are identified as potential increased transparency, potential increased civility, meaning higher rates of civilian compliance with officer commands, potential of leading to a quicker resolution to civilian lawsuits or complaints, and potential corroborating evidence for arrests, as well as the potential use for training. And the same article found that studies found that the use of body-worn cameras led to increases in arrests, prosecutions, and guilty pleas. Again, this is just a quick glance at some of the potential benefits of body cameras to just give you a little bit of a holistic perspective. As we bring the presentations of this evening to a close, I hope our students have underscored the complex nature of the subject of police reform. As further food for thought, we should remember that there's a great degree of variance from one state to the next, from one municipality to the next, with regard to policing, as each law enforcement department must not only abide by state and local regulation, but also respond to the demographic and needs of their particular communities. This could mean variance in training, variance in funding, and variance in availability of resources for each police department or law enforcement department. In closing, I thought I'd offer the following passage, which I think emphasizes both the tension and the coordination that may occur between the police and the public that they serve. The passage was cited in a 2018 article in the National Institute of Justice Journal, citing Sir Robert Peel and his second principle of law enforcement. Quote, the ability of the police to perform their duties is dependent upon public approval of police existence, actions, behavior, and the ability of the police to secure and maintain public respect, end quote. With that, I close, and we have some time this evening. If there's anyone that would like to type comments into the chat for our presenters to answer questions.
So I'll ask a question to all of the presenters. What was the most interesting thing that you found in your research on these topics? What was something that surprised you or really stood out?
I can go first.
Okay, thank you, Michaela.
What I found was with police body cameras, the public believes that, or not the public, I'm not speaking for the public, but I have seen that what they're trying to get from it is police officers changing their behaviors or acting different while they're on cameras. And I found several statistics showing that the actions that the police officers take hasn't really changed with the addition of police body cameras, which was surprising to me in a way, because seeing what we see in media, we think that, oh, that wouldn't have happened, or that something else would have happened if the cameras were on, if the cameras weren't on. But a lot of the statistics that I found have shown that the officers did not change their behavior. And I thought that was pretty neat in a positive way, if that makes sense. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Michaela, and you don't have to apologize.
Yeah, adding on to that, to the topic of change in police departments, I just, being the sociology brain that I have, I found it so interesting with the history in policing, just that since really its establishment, there have been issues and there have been people addressing issues, yet we continue to have problems, we continue to have controversy in these issues. And I feel that after all this time, you'd think that we would make a little bit of progress. And yes, we have, but not nearly enough to where there's a solid structure of how we need to do things. So I think that change just needs to continue to happen. And it's just interesting to me that it's taking so long.
If you want, yeah.
What I found most interesting was how the money is allocated, like how the money is kind of split up for the budget when it comes to police departments. The fact that so much is spent on pensions and benefits and payroll and all kinds of things, I never really thought to consider where that money is going into. I also didn't consider where that money is coming from, given that there's also other ways that they do obtain money. I just found it interesting. I never thought to look at that aspect in the police department.
Are there any other responses from our speakers tonight?
From the research I did over the controversy with the no-knock warrants, I thought the one report from the American Civil Liberties Union was really interesting, since that was published in 2014, and it was already addressing some of the major issues that have been recently highlighted by the media. So in about 6 years, that's kind of when the media really picked up the controversy. So I thought it was interesting that we already had notion that this was sort of an issue for people, and they had already begun to recognize it. And then it really only took the one event to cause a lot of people to begin looking at changing how we issue no-knock warrants.
Madeline, do you have anything you want to add?
I do. What I found really interesting while looking at the topic regarding no-knock warrants is how each state, or how many states, are reacting to recent events, such as Breonna Taylor's passing, and how all of them are taking different actions to try to fix the issues that are within it, whether that be to ban no-knock raids, or whether it be reevaluate how they're doing them. I just think that looking at how the different states are doing that and understanding, what is working and what is not, is definitely going to lead to us being able to reform the system, because it's not that no-knock raids are inherently bad. However, there have been issues that have been associated with them. So how can we fix it?
And I'll mention there's a comment in the chat right now that suggests the no-knock warrants should be done in uniforms. Thank you to that contributor. And there's another question in the chat from Amy, how do the panelists feel about redirecting money from crime fighting to incorporating social workers as issues that do not involve arresting people?
Yeah, okay, I'll talk about it. I think it's a positive, I think it's a positive steer into the right direction, given that there are programs like Cahoots that do help with individuals who are mentally ill, homeless, and have substance abuse issues. Having a program like that in every state actually would take some of the calls that the 911 department usually gets, and it works as it's redirected to that crisis place, so that police officers are able to focus on other calls that require more of their attention at the moment. So I mean, I think it's a positive way to allocate money into a different system, because if we continue to have a system where we're having everybody call 911, all those calls are flooding in, and there could be something going on that requires way more attention. But if we have a program such as Cahoots, where that team can take care of what's going on with a mentally ill person, I think it just gives police officers more time to respond to other pressing issues as well. So I don't think of it as a negative outlook. I think of it as a positive outlook. I think that we in turn would save money. And yes, it has to do with social workers and putting other people that aren't, in a way, some people perceive not benefiting, like not helping the system. But in turn, it really is helping the system by alleviating some of that pressure that the police officers have placed on their shoulders.
Would anyone else like to chime in?
If I can, I'd love to add to that. I definitely agree with what Diego has said. And the way that I kind of perceive that question is that we have all of these different programs and different people who are specialists in their specific careers and positions. So just my opinion on that, I think it is wonderful to have a variety of specialists involved in all of the different cases. Police workers, social workers, counselors, psychologists, doctors, any of those kind of positions amongst others. Like the more that we can have different people with all of their different perceptions and backgrounds and understandings, I think we'll just generally have a better outcome for the people. So
I also think that having professionals that are trained to handle a situation with a mentally ill person is better than putting an officer who hasn't been trained in crisis intervention training into that situation, because we've seen from multiple situations, cases, media, news outlets, all kinds of ways, we've seen people be treated very poorly by police officers because those police officers aren't properly trained. And so having that variety, like Ali was saying, of specialists to help alleviates a lot of the issues that are arising because of the inability to assess a situation a certain way, if that makes sense.
Yes, to me that makes great sense. And I would like to put, because the question was an opinionated question, is for officers to serve and protect and do their job, dealing with situations that may not need an officer, a crime fighting officer, as the question was posing it, to take care of the situation. So it allows them to use their time in another way and go to other calls that may need the officer's help, rather than like if a social worker were to deal with a case of someone who is not being violent or having or showing any violence or aggression and just needs a different perspective to handle. Like there's cases that I've seen of officers dealing with, that they may not be properly trained to deal with an individual who may have, for an example, Down syndrome, or who are as autistic, and they may not react the same way that officers are used to people reacting. And so having a social worker or a person with a different specialty to assess that situation allows them to get the necessary help that they need, that may not absolutely need a crime fighting police officer to be assisting.
Do we have anyone else that would like to chime in? Do I have any other questions from the chat?
I do have another point to make.
Sure, go ahead.
With the initial question, the beginning question of what the information that we have found when we were doing our research and what something sparked our interest or what we found was different, is that when we think of police body cameras, we just think of the feed, it's the information coming through, and then how it's getting processed and analyzed and whatnot. What I didn't think of and what came up in my research is the storage cost. To think of how much space is needed to store, I don't know how much space it needs for X amount of hours of camera footage, but to think of files, electronic files or music files on a flash drive, how much space you would need to hold all that footage. That was a big thing that I found, other than the cost associated, is the cost associated with the storage.
That's a really interesting point, Michaela. Thank you for that. If there are no other comments and no other questions, we're coming on 8 p.m. I want to thank everyone again for listening this evening. And thank you again for your patience. We had a few technical glitches at the beginning, and we had to have security let us into the room here on campus. Some minor glitches as we started this evening. So we thank you all for joining us. We thank you all for your comments and your questions. I know this was a great experience for our students, and we really enjoyed working on this project. And we hope we offered some insight into what we know has been a really sort of a topic that's, let's say, surfaced recently in the past year and become quite the discussion in the public sphere. And so we wanted to address it in a way of really approaching different perspectives and lending some insight. Again, our intent is not to advocate, our intent was not to speak for anyone, but we hope we offered some information on these issues, and we hope we gave you some food for thought. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support tonight. I want to thank Angela and all the panelists. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Please stay safe and warm. The last I knew, there was a blizzard happening outside at the beginning of the evening, so hopefully the snow has let up. And with that, we'll sign off tonight. Thank you all. Okay.